My talk will be a little bit technical, but I think that half of my talk could be used by any diagrammer and half is just for the Inkscape. As they've shown, there are basically two kinds of people. That's who are talented and are able to draw, and that's who are not. And unfortunately, I'm here. So I need some tool to go around this, my inability to draw by hand, to achieve reasonable quality with reasonable effort, because I don't want to have the best diagram, I just want to have reasonable diagram. But first, some basic decision I did. First is to separate two phases of diagramming. Drawing phase, that means the drawing the single step, from layout, which I'm doing which I do in just a Word. So one Inkscape. It's not necessarily the best tool. For me, it's just reasonable. It's of course vector graphic. It produces drawings in different popular formats, so it could be exported or copied and passed it to different other programs that we use to set up the layout. It's light, both the program and generated drawings. It's easy to start. I used standard tutorials, and I think I spent between 8 and 10 hours to start from completely nothing to draw diagrams. It's free and it has some features that support geometric construction, which are important for me. For me, computer diagramming has important advantages. It gives reasonable quality. Of course, hand drawing, if you can do it, can produce some kind of artwork, but I can't. So I can achieve reasonable quality with computers. I can reuse basic drawings. So the often initial steps repeats in many different diagrams, and also reuse the drawing as the base for the next step in a diagram. It has grids and snapping, what supports exact drawing. And what this reuse of drawings means for me, it's or what is required. It requires the same size of the initial square, the same size of lines, and same symbols. So for that, I constructed a toolbox. Sorry. That was mentioned more or less like that. That's a file I'm starting drawing. There are basic square, there are set of lines, set of arrows, set of symbols. So instead of that's basically how it looks like for me, and it's very useful because I can copy instead of drawing in from the scratch each time, and each time different. So what actually my toolbox contain? It is template, as I said, template file as which I use as starting point. It has grids. It's size of the basic square sheet. It's some set of the predefined lines and arrows and set of symbols, and I will go step by step. I decided to set initial square paper size 9 by 9 centimeters wide. It's about 10 centimeters, and it's easy to define grids for division by powers of 2, powers of 5, which is quite simple, but also it could be easily divided by 9. And I defined it grids for this. It is from in document properties you can define the grids, and what is important is to set the check snap to visible grids only, because if it is checked, you can easily switch on and switch off snapping to the grids. Just pressing hash key. What grids I have in my toolbox? It's 4 by 4 by major lines and 16 by 16 minors. We very quickly goes to details, so I have also grid 4 times more dense. Its other is by 5. It's major grid lines is it's division of my square 5 by 5 and minor 50 by 50. And similar for dividing by 3, actually 6 by 6 with minor lines 36 by 36. And also there is nice things for, especially for the tessellation. There is also triangle grid, which is included in the standard. Next things are predefined symbols, arrows, lines. It helps me to keep consistency of style over the time and across different diagrams and save time as well. So instead of drawing, as I said, instead of drawing from the scratch, I pick from my toolbox and copy it to the diagram area. Lines. What is important is line style. There are 3 different types of the line style. It is shown the cap style. You can see in large drawing what happened. This strange effect we would like to avoid in case of the sharp end of the line. So I always use round cap that could be set in the file and stroke tab and stroke style for a line. Next thing what we do is dash dot line. Inkscape offers standard dash dot line, which is the first one we can see. But when we select rounded cap, I have shaded what's these round caps that are added, and our dots became smaller, just smaller dashes instead of dots. But what we expect, it's rather this last line, this on the bottom. So how to obtain it? Unfortunately, we must define our own line, but fortunately it's not so hard as one may expect. So let's start with this simple example dashed line. So to have your own line, first draw a standard dash line set with, I used 0.5 millimeter. We open XML editor in a tab, select this, our line. If it is selected, this editor position on this line, we select style attribute, and in the definition of the style, we must find stroke dash array and set it, just putting in this window marked 10 by 10. So it just does mean that we want to have a dashed line with 10 units of dash and then 10 units of gap. And units are related to line width. So when you resize line, the gaps and dashes also with thicker line, the dashes and gaps also became larger. They will change accordingly. So let's go further with our nice dots. So to obtain it, we defined stroke dash array, but we put in the middle of the dashed almost, in the middle of the gap, we put almost nothing dash. This is 0.1. So we have dash of 10, gap of 4.95, almost nothing, this 0.1 dash, and remaining part of the gap. That's on the top. We can see the small black line, but also the gray caps which are added. So when we have the round cap line, this almost nothing dash became nice round dot. And if you wish to use double dot line, you can define in similar way, or also in the similar way we can define dot line. And we must do it with this editor, which is not very nice to use only once, then put our line to the toolbox and copy it whenever we would like to use it, or just paste style. Because formally Inkscape does not offer concept of the line style or style library, but almost do it. When you define your lines, put them in toolbox, you have your own style library. Just select the line of the required style, copy it, select line to modify, and paste style. It's Ctrl-Shift-V command. And also this paste style is very useful when drawing the next step of the diagram on the base of the last one in such a way it's very useful to quickly change style of mountain or valley line to style of existing trees. Next problem is when we draw, very often or practically always happens what happened at the top, that our line starts when we want to start it, but ends somewhere before. And for this, in the stroke style, we can slightly move dashed line with this window marked with the, and we can move line to the left and have nice starting and ending dash which meet the lines on both sides. Sometimes problem is a little bit harder, because when we have, for the first, at the top, we have the poor line crossing, because it's not symmetrical, which we like. We can do this offset to have a nice line crossing. But at this moment, we have poor line ends. So to deal with this, I defined different spacing. The second is 25% more. So if I have such problem, I use another spacing of the line from my library, and usually it does solve the problem. So you can see the definition of the two lines and how they look like. Next thing, arrows. Inkscape offers reasonable standard arrows for fold or fold and unfold lines, but some of us insist for fold behind line or empty arrows. So how to get it? We may design our own arrows. First, we must locate the definition file at the standard Windows installation. It is at the location in the share directory markers.svg file. First, make a backup copy. When you make mistake in this file, Inkscape may not start at all. Now, it's text file. We may edit it with the notepad. There is arrow section, and we may put a new code for new arrows. How to have this code? There's a code for the fold behind arrows. Actually, I found existing arrow and modified only the definition of the path, this parameter D. And also fill style to known, to have it empty, not crossword. What does this D means? Another thing, there are different because of the orientation of the coordination system is along the line from begin to the end. We need a different definition of the arrowheads for the beginning and for the end, but this rotate solved the problem because the end arrow is just rotated so 180 degrees of the initial. And there is a code for empty arrow, but what does it mean? In this code, we have some kind of the turtle graphics. So first is move. Our M means move to the specific point, 0, 0. Then, okay, it's okay. First, the coordination system. It the point 0, 0 is the beginning of the line. The positive x-axis is along the line, and y-axis is perpendicular. So move to 0, 0 in our case is the starting point of the line. Then draw a line, this L minus 10.20 is draw a line to this second point, another line in the coordinate system, and then put a curve which from the point we already are to the with two handles, this is the Bezier curve, and to the specified endpoint. And also it is not used in the fold behind arrow, but there is a very useful Z, which means close the path. So that's explanation what I put in the definition file here. It's exactly what I explained. Let's go. And what is important, opposite to the standard arrows, which is the on the bottom, which ends more or less in the endpoint. My defined arrows extend over the start point of the end or the end point. Why? Because when we make bend of the arrow, the standard arrow, as you can see on the right side, does not behave very well. So I decided that in case of diagramming, usually we don't need that the arrow ends in the specific point. It's more important that the direction of the arrow is always good, but that it is really arrowhead, not something strange that is linked with the end of the line. So we have arrows we need. Another thing is partially dotted line. When we would like to show a move from inside, we need nice curved arrow, but part of it dotted and part of it solid. How to obtain it? First, draw an arrow, then at midpoint the border between hidden and visible, duplicate the line, so we have two arrows, one on another in the same position, and we delete the first segment from the one and the last segment from the second arrow and change the style of the one. So it's still curved because the curve is maintained when you delete points, but we can change style separately from the one and for the second. And the last thing is to group these two lines so they do not move by accident separately. Non-grid reference point. It's quite usual that we need a. Usually we start with the grid, but sooner or later, usually sooner, we need lines that do not lie on the square or triangle grid, whatever we use. It is not usual case in case of tessellation, but just in case of very simple case of the bird base, the crossing points of the bisectors or 22.5 degrees lines do not lie on the grid. So how can we construct our own grid with such points? I use for it separate template layer when I draw my own grid and use later the snapping to the crossing point feature of the Inkscape. So first we create a new template, then we set grid on, draw a square and its diagonals, and with snapping set on, with the grid set on, snapping set on, it and snapping nodes and paths to the grid, Inkscape will snap our points for us automatically. Then next step are creating bisectors. So we switch on the snapping point, snap item rotation centers. We duplicate a diagonal, move the rotation center to the end point, and rotate it by 22.5 degrees, and repeat it around. So we have diagonals sticking out from our square, but we have our intersection points. So now we can change color and the thickness so it does not interfere our drawing of the diagram. We lock the template layer and select our diagram. at the moment we may set grid off and snap to path intersection on, and we are ready to draw on our diagram. This template diagram are the very tiny red line. I don't know if they are visible, but they are here. And now we have our drawing became ruler lines. So when you lock the template layer, the template object cannot be selected, but crossing points will steep snap points of our drawings to in another layer. And also, if you wish to see diagram without this template line, we can easily just set all the layer invisible. And when I finish a step, I group all the object and move the diagram to another place, and I draw in the same place on my grid the next step. Actually, I duplicate and modify the existing diagram. Any questions?
You have two different mountain fold lines with a single dot and a double dot. How do you decide when to use which style?
I use only single dot personally, but as some people desperately need double dot line, I would like to demonstrate that it is possible, and actual code how to obtain it.
Thank you for the presentation. I've done a lot of work with, I haven't written a book in Inkscape, but I've done several diagrams with it, and this answered a couple of questions I had. Are you going to make the presentation available for downloading so we can get the more detailed instructions?
Yes, just send me. If anybody would like to have the presentation, the Inkscape file with all these examples and the markers SVG file, just send me a diagram and I will send it to you.
Send you an email.
Send email, yes.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, when you make the arrows, they
Yes.
appear in the library of arrows.
Yes, yes, they appear in the library of arrows.
I think there is a similar things if you want to introduce your symbols, for example, to have the library in similar way as for arrowheads. You can have also the symbols, for example, for turn the paper around, rotate the paper, and whatever you think about, the symbols which you repeatedly use. You can have, there is similar procedure. You have to create the file with SVG file basically in Inkscape, but under some condition. I don't remember the details, but you can have kind of like library, and then you will find it in the, and you have to have it on each computer where you are using Inkscape if you want to use them. And then your Inkscape, there is, I think it's called symbols, and then you will have it edit as another library from which you can choose. So you can have, for example, I was using it for the numbers. If you want to have something more complicated, I wanted numbers in circles. So I prepared file with all these numbers up till whatever. and then I was choosing from these symbols and was pasting them directly to your file. And the only difference is that you don't have to have all these extra content in every file with your diagram, that you can just choose from symbol menu.
Actually, I thought about it, but I found that putting in it's not generally the SVG file are very light, so it does not occupy so much place. And I do not use the same file for the layout of the page. So for me, it doesn't matter if I have some garbage on the site.
For me, it really, sometimes visual garbage, it's like, I don't like to have it everywhere, but sometimes, yes, it's easiest is just to have a template file which you are starting when you draw a diagram. It's just an option.
Other questions, comments? Thank you.